What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back in the video. Only 4 weeks left until the fantasy playoffs. Also, only like 1, maybe 2 weeks left until the trade deadline is passed in most leagues. So if you're making a push for your playoff roster, now is the time to do so. We'll start off by reiterating the big two that we're going after, just to make sure you don't think that we're off of them now. Nico Collins, Mike Evans. If you're trying to acquire a league winner at the wide receiver position, those are the two I'd be going after. Nico is the wide receiver 1 overall rest of season and should return this week. I think that's the expectation. Mike Evans will be a wide receiver 1 when he returns. That should be somewhere around weeks 13 or 14. Again, these are two players that, when healthy, which they should be for the fantasy playoffs, have extraordinarily high weekly ceilings, which is more rare at wide receiver than we thought it would be to open the season. To open the year, there were a lot of wide receivers we thought were going to be having a ton of points per game. We're going to consistently having, 100 yards and a touchdown. That has not been the case. We have not seen a ceiling for more than really a couple wide receivers this season. So to close the year and into the fantasy playoffs, if you can roster guys that are capable of 8 or 9 receptions, 120, 130 yards, multiple touchdowns, there's not that many of them. And there's not as many as we thought there would be to open season. If you have them on your roster, that can be a huge positional advantage. So those remain the top targets. But who else are we going after this week? Breece Hall, number 1 at running back, hasn't scored in 3 straight games. He is 9th on the season in expected points per game, only 22nd in actual points per game. Still being not featured, but he's getting 74% of the backfield's expected fantasy points over the last month. So basically 74% of the volume of the expectation for fantasy. That's still really strong. Again, it's not featured, but no running backs getting 100%. Even getting close, you can get close to like 80%. That's a really, really strong workload. Having Adams on the team is going to help. Is going to help every single week? No, but it's going to help the offense be more consistent. It's going to help the offense stay on the field more, have a higher upside. And if you look at strength of schedule for the season, 2nd best remaining strength of schedule for running backs and the 4th best playoff strength of schedule for running backs. Now, he does have his bye in week 12. So that's one thing to consider is, do you need him right now? Are you in the playoff push, or are you good for playoffs and now you're building your roster? I would say if you're the latter team, if you are good for playoffs, maybe you haven't locked in the number 1 seed, but with 4 weeks left, you'd probably have to go like 0-4 to not make playoffs. At that point, you're pushing for your playoff roster. And I think if you're doing that, you can use this to your advantage. You can say, okay, still got his bye coming up, hasn't scored in 3 straight. Maybe the team is much more willing to give up him, especially if they are in the playoff push. If you're in that bunch, though, probably less ideal to trade for him because you're not going to have him in what could be a very important week for you to make playoffs. Can still do it, can still play it risky because all you got to do is make the playoffs and anything can happen. But I would probably trade for him more if you're in a team that's set up really well, is really just one, monster running back away. Good time to buy low. Malik Nabers, a wide receiver. I just think there's no way Daniel Jones is the starting quarterback after their bye. I don't think Drew Lock is any good, but he can't be worse. Like, you cannot be worse passing the ball than Daniel Jones has been. The volume has been incredible for Malik Nabers. The targets have just been awful. Over the last 4 weeks, he's averaged 10.5 targets per game. Can we remember that this man is a rookie? He is playing extraordinarily well. He is getting wide open, and he is hyperly athletic. There is no way that you can average 10.5 yards per game, or 10.5 targets per game, and only be averaging 55 receiving yards per game, which is 5.3 yards per target. That is pathetic. That can't happen for a player of the skill level, the caliber of player of Malik Nabers. I don't know if Drew Lock is truly the answer to elevating things for Nabers, but if Lock can turn things around, it can just be a little bit better than Daniel Jones has been, then Nabers does have a league-winning ceiling. Also, you think, okay, even if he's kind of the same as a passer, well, Daniel Jones has these games where he scrambles a lot. So you have a lot of these dropbacks that turn into rush attempts, well, that's not going to happen with Drew Lock. Drew Lock is not someone like he'll take the yards if they're there, but not very often. He's not going to take off more than 2 to 4 times per game. Daniel Jones will have games where he has 8, 9, 10 rush attempts, right? So that can be a difference maker, right? If he can maintain the same target share he had with Daniel Jones, but all of a sudden a handful of dropbacks that used to be turning into scrambles are now turning into pass attempts, add on another, 1 to 3 targets per game. The ceiling is incredible. So again, if he can turn things around at all, Nabers does have an insane ceiling because the targets are absolutely incredible. Number 3 rest of season strength of schedule, number 1 playoff strength of schedule, and 0 bottom 14 matchups remaining. So every single week moving forward, Malik Nabers does have a strong matchup. Again, besides the bye this week. Use the bye to your advantage. If you are building your championship team and the team that has him needs some help this week, it can be a great time to buy low on Nabers because really just the volume is so amazing. The production hasn't been there because Daniel Jones is awful. DJ Moore up next. Similar situation. I wouldn't say the volume is nearly as impressive, but we could finally be getting some hope for the Bears. They finally fired Shane Waldron. Play calling was not the only thing holding this offense back. Like at the end of the day, Caleb Williams still has almost taken a step back because he had a few weeks where he was really good. And then, I don't know, ever since they came off of the bye, he's been really bad. And a lot of this stuff is still on him. But the bigger issue has been play calling. Their play calling has been absolutely terrible. There's no guarantee that they're going to improve in that area, but it's like with Nabers. Things can't get worse. The worst thing that can happen is a lateral move for play calling here. And so if you do the trade for DJ Moore, it's not like you're buying high on DJ Moore right now. He's gone over 33 yards 0 times since week 5. So I don't think anyone who has him is asking a lot, but maybe the play calling gets better. Number 3 playoff strength of schedule. He's at the Vikings versus the Lions versus the Seahawks. Again, no guarantee to get back on track. And those are still good defenses. Like they're good matchups for fantasy because you've got the Vikings, you've got the Lions, right? 2 teams that you cannot run on. These are great run defenses. These are also great offenses attached to them. So you're going to have games likely for the Bears where they have to see really elevated play volume. So even if they have decent pass defenses, even if they have creative schemes that can really turn the ball over and create confusion for quarterbacks, yeah, there's a chance that Caleb Williams falls apart, but there's also a chance that he throws the ball 40, 45 times in these games. And if you get the play calling to improve and you've got a player of the skill level of DJ Moore, it's not a lock that he's going to do well. But I mean, if Caleb can start cooking later in the season, those are 3 games. Again, add the Seahawks on there. We could really see them aired out, and DJ Moore is going to have a high ceiling. And again, I just can't imagine he's difficult to trade for. 33 yards. He has not hit or not gone over 33 yards since week 5. I have him graded out rest of season as like roughly flex value, but I wouldn't be shocked if they come out and all of a sudden the play calling is better, things turn around, and he's a wide receiver 2 rest of season. Like he can easily be a wide receiver 2 with a good schedule. Right now, I don't think it's going to cost you that to trade for him. Next up, Bucky Irving. Another one that's on bye this week. So again, caution if you have to win this week, but use to your advantage if you don't have to win this week. Or, and realistically, even if you had to win this week and you're trading for Bucky Irving, well, you're not exactly trading Justin Jefferson for him, right? Like you can still kind of maybe package 2 players together that you're not using this week, get them, put them on the bench. Those are 2 players that maybe you weren't even starting, and it's not a big deal that he's on bye. But if you look at the upcoming schedule for Bucky Irving, oh my goodness. Number 1 rest of season strength of schedule by a mile. Number 3 playoff strength of schedule by a mile. They're no longer using Sean Tucker. So remember, we were a little hesitant with them because they were like, oh, we're going to go with the hot hand. And they were bringing on Sean Tucker. And so now you have touches going to Tucker, touches going to White, touches going to Irving. You're like, oh, like this is not, the greatest offense of all time. Any team that's using a 3-man committee, we hate that in fantasy because even if you are the one that gets the hot hand, number 1, there's a chance you aren't because there's 2 other running backs that can do it. But number 2, they're still getting some touches. So your ceiling is only so high. But now that they're not really using Sean Tucker anymore, you can function on a 2 running back committee on the team, especially when Bucky Irving has been the best on the ground, has been the one they've been using in that area. So you've got that going for them. You've got Baker playing out of his mind. Baker's playing some of the best football of his career, and he's doing it with absolute trash at wide receiver. When they get Mike Evans back as well, this offense is going to be really good. And again, you know how I mentioned the number one rest of season strength schedule by a mile? After the bye, Giants, Panthers, Raiders. Then they get a tough matchup with the Chargers, first round of the fantasy playoffs, but then Dallas and Panthers again. 5 of those 6 matchups, again, Giants, Panthers, Raiders, tough against the Chargers, Cowboys, Panthers again. You really can't ask for much better of an upcoming schedule. So even if you're in the bucket of, I need to win, I can't go 0-4, I'm not going to make playoffs, so I do that. Giants, Panthers, Raiders to close the regular season. You'll be starting him in all 3 of those games, and he's got a really nice ceiling in those weeks. Switching over to tight end, TJ Hockenson. He's got a top 5 ceiling rest of the season. I would not be shocked if we said this point on TJ Hockenson is a top 3 tight end. Now, I don't have him projected at that point because we do still need to see the snaps, see the route share increase, but they have been. Snaps, if you look at snaps, only like a minor, I think it was like a 1% increase from his return to last week. And so you can be like, oh man, is the role not going to be there? The share of dropbacks, the passing snaps did increase. It didn't get up to like top 5 numbers for tight ends, but the fact that that is increasing is a very positive sign. Number 5, playoff strength of schedule. All 3 are plus matchups. The semifinals and finals are each top 10 matchups for tight ends. It's a brutal division as well, so you know this Viking team is going to be in the playoff push. Like, you know, without a shadow of a doubt, that when we are in the fantasy playoffs weeks, you are not getting a tanking team. You are not getting a team that is locked in for the playoffs, that is resting their guys. They need to win. This is an unbelievable division that is not going to be decided with 2 and 3 weeks left in the season. They're going to be pushing, and he commanded 9 targets on only a 46% snap share. Again, the percent, like they took him off the field on run plays, so the percent was still higher, but he still has not been participating in all the snaps that he will be participating in, all the passing snaps he will be participating in moving forward, and he still commanded 9 targets. He's got a ceiling that many tight ends simply don't have. We thought this season that we were going to have, at worst, 4 or 5 tight ends that were dominating, that were really producing strong numbers. It just hasn't happened. Whether it's been through injuries, whether it's been through offenses operating a little bit differently than we thought, whether it's been through tight ends just simply not being as good or involved as we thought, a number of very high-end tight ends have not produced to the level that we were expecting this season. So it's created another situation where you've got Kelsey at the top, you've got Kittle at the top, and you've got some other tight ends that can do it. But we're in a year, we're in the fantasy playoffs. If a tight end is capable of 9, 10 receptions, that can absolutely be league winning because they could be the top tight end producer by 15 points. Like, that can absolutely happen. So you've got to be targeting players that have that in the range of outcome. Other tight end to look at is Trey McBride, number 3 rest of season strength of schedule, number 4 playoff strength of schedule, still due for some positive touchdown luck. We've been talking about that recently. He's got 4 dome games in their final 5 weeks. He is on bye this week, so another situation. If that team's in a must-win, use that to your advantage. And I would also say that Arizona pass catchers, like Arizona's been great. The Cardinals have been a really good offense this season, but they're an offense that when they get ahead, they are perfectly willing to play slow and run the ball a ton. And that's what's happened recently. A 20-point win against the Bears, a 25-point win against the Jets. Now they're on bye. So I think it's a good time to buy low because he's been great. He's been very involved in the offense. He's looked super athletic. Remember that play he had with like the stiff arm and he jumps over the guy? Like, there are not many tight ends that are capable of that sort of play, but he hasn't been scoring and they haven't been in competitive games. If they're in a competitive game, he's going to have a massive ceiling. Haven't seen it yet, but it is absolutely coming. He's another one, insane ceiling the fantasy playoffs, but we haven't seen it yet, so easier to trade for him. Final player, go over today. Quarterback, CJ Stroud, 11th in expected points per game in the season, 23rd in actual points per game. Nico, again, should be returning this week, 7th best remaining strength of schedule. He's got home versus the Dolphins, at the Chiefs, and then here it is, the league winner, home versus the Ravens in the fantasy championships. I think that's the big reason. It is not going to be difficult to trade for CJ Stroud. And I don't think CJ Stroud, like if you want, a super top end quarterback, you got to be going after like Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, the guys that we know, Lamar, if you could possibly even pull that off. But understand, and I think everyone knows, it's so hard to actually trade for those quarterbacks. Like no one is actually giving up Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. Everyone knows they have a high ceiling. Everyone knows they're good. No one's trading them away for a downgrade. It just doesn't make sense for a lot of teams unless they are super desperate, unless they like drafted Lamar plus Jaden Daniels. But at this point in the season, they probably already did that trade. Unless that is the case, it's very difficult to trade for like a top 3, top 5 quarterback. So you got to try and target a quarterback, if you're looking for a quarterback, that has an insane schedule to close the season, but it's very easy to acquire. The volume has been there for CJ Stroud. He just kind of hasn't been hitting it, but it makes sense, right? He hasn't had Diggs recently. Nico's been out for a while. Nico's like the keystone to this team. Like he is the most important offensive player. I mean, besides CJ Stroud, obviously, but he's the most important player to this passing attack because everything flows through him. And when he's gone, you really see a big drop off to the secondary wide receivers that they simply don't trust. So getting him back is going to really elevate that ceiling. And again, if you're looking for a league winner, look at the matchups. Home versus the Dolphins. It's not like the Dolphins have a bad defense, but their offense, while it hasn't gotten on track yet this season, is capable of scoring 30 points. So that can be a shootout. At Kansas City, honestly, their offense hasn't looked amazing this season, but we know Kansas City is capable of scoring a lot of points. I really think, though, the true league-winning upside here is that fantasy championship. If you can get to the fantasy championships with CJ Stroud as your quarterback, he's probably going to be projected that week as a top 5 quarterback, home in a dome versus Baltimore. That is going to be an absolutely insane game. He is likely going to throw for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. So if you want someone for that fantasy championship, CJ Stroud, definitely the guy I'd go after. So that'll do it for this week. I've got a few more options on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. If you want to check that out, you can look over there. I'll be back tomorrow, 8 a.m., a little earlier than usual, for the start-sit video for week 11. That, my friends, is the end of this one, and thanks for watching.